Welcome to Morning Devotion with Ken Gurley. Devotions designed to inspire you on your daily walk with God. Here's your host, Ken Gurley.
Hey, good Monday morning to each and everybody here. Thank you for being a part of this great devotion family. I almost said morning devotion. We are morphing from morning devotion into daily devotion. We are not the MD, but the DD family. Our family's taking on a new name, the DD. Not Mad Dog, Dastardly Dog. Yes, I don't know. We're the DD family, but I'm happy that you're here this Monday morning. What a great subject today, the enemy's prized device. I am on the road. I'm overseas, and as I mentioned last Friday, I'm doing a missions trip in the country that our particular church has spent so much time there, and so many great people doing so many great things, and it's one of those things that I wish I could tell you about them all, but I can't, and we want to make sure that we can keep doing these. And so thank you for your prayers this week. When I'm on the road, I can't see you. I try several different ways when I'm on the road, but usually I can't bring all of the equipment that I need to see you. And if push comes to shove, fail safe, for this particular week, I've actually recorded some in advance in case I am unable to go live and be with you. So thank you for being here and being a part of this. According to an ancient legend, the devil once advertised his tools for sale at a public auction. Prospective buyers came from miles around to purchase tools of the devil's trade. But just prior to the sale, as is common at the auction, the people examined the merchandise and they found one oddly shaped tool, which was labeled clearly not for sale. They asked the devil why this tool wasn't to be sold. And the devil answered, said, really, I could spare any other tool here in the warehouse, but I can't do without this one. It's the most useful implement I have, and it's called discouragement. With this tool, I can work my way into hearts otherwise closed. And once I get this tool in a man's heart, the way is open to plant anything there that I should desire. Undoubtedly, this legend's not true, but it contains a sobering truth that discouragement is a very dangerous state of mind because it leaves us open to the enemy of our souls. And all this week, if you would permit me on daily devotion, this is going to be a long battle. Daily. I will not be discouraged, though. Daily devotion. This week, I'm going to deal with discouragement. All week long, just want to deal with discouragement. It's natural to human life, but many people can find no way really to compensate and deal with it. And today, if you would allow me, I want to look at the life of Elijah, and we're going to find some help through him and through his example in managing discouragement. So we know that Elijah was down and almost out. The last picture we had of Elijah is that moment of great triumph over the prophets of Baal and on the slopes of Mount Carmel. Elijah's prayer is answered by fire. The drought was immediately over. 3.5 years, it was over. The sound of abundant rain was heard. Elijah's running on foot and outracing the king's chariot. Come on, folks. That is a victory all the way around. But just a few verses later, we see Elijah hiding under a juniper tree, begging God to take away my life. What a contrast. From the heights of Mount Carmel to the shade of a juniper, what has happened to this great prophet, this great man of God? What happened was Jezebel the queen heard that her prophets of Baal had been slaughtered, and she was not really too happy. She went into a rage. She sent word to Elijah, I'm going to track you down. I'm going to hunt you down. No matter how long it takes me, I'm taking you out, buddy. That's a new translation right there. It's impossible to imagine that Elijah would be afraid of her. I mean, the day before he had laughed and mocked all the false prophets. He had challenged all of Israel. But when Elijah heard Jezebel's threat, he was mentally, emotionally, spiritually in a posture that he didn't know what to do. And without divine sanction or permission, this great prophet of God ran for his life into the wilderness. So I want to talk to you today about discouragement and the lessons that we learn from Elijah. All of you that are on YouTube, I would just urge you to subscribe and share, and then Facebook, follow and share, and identify yourself. Come out. We are looking forward 1 week from today, the announcement that I made a few days ago. This daily devotion will be on drive time in the KYCC area and in Stockton at 5:45 a.m. Pacific, 7:45 a.m. Central, 5:45 p.m. Pacific, and 7:45 p.m. Central. Now, these devotions that we'll be sharing on the radio are different than what we are doing here. Someday they may converge, but right now, this is the way it is, and we look forward to you tuning in and being a part of that. Okay, let me jump back. It was there in the desert. He lay exhausted under the small shade of a juniper tree. The sun beat down upon him. The heat was unbearable. And such was Elijah's discouragement that finally he just moans and groans. It's enough, Lord. I'm done. Take away my life. The enemy's most prized possession is that tool of discouragement. And I want to teach you today how to deal with discouragement. First of all, anytime that you're discouraged, we need to look to the root and the source of it all. We need to slow down and face it. Why am I down? What's going on here? The sources of Elijah's discouragement were profound. All of us have spent or will spend time under the juniper tree. Each of us will know something about a season of discouragement. It doesn't matter how great you and I think we are, or great as Elijah was, his great accomplishments, the great power of God that was on display through him. Life had lost interest for Elijah. He was reduced to being seated under the juniper tree. He was discouraged. Why? There are many causes of discouragement. It can come from being just weary, sick, tired body. You're frustrated. You have dashed hopes, blocked ambitions, nonstop trials like waves which keep breaking over your soul. Maybe you're experiencing a sense of uselessness or failure, or perhaps even discouraged from the knowledge of failure to please God. A transgression of sin is out there. The sources of Elijah's discouragement, first, was a physical problem. I mean, think about it. If you put the ruler to the map, he'd just run about 100 miles to get from Jezreel to Beersheba. Now, that's some significant running. In these days, such a journey was enough to wear anyone out physically. So one of the sources of his discouragement, he was exhausted. We hear a lot about mind over matter and how our minds can influence control and direction over our bodies. But this doesn't do away the fact that we do get physically exhausted. And when we do, it will influence our state of mind. Elijah was discouraged, and that discouragement was deepened by the fact that he was exhausted. Maybe Elijah couldn't even see that, but there was one who did. The Bible says that as Elijah lay under the juniper tree, an angel touched him. He was suffering from some sort of heat stroke, dehydration, exhaustion, laid in a stupor beneath the meager shade of that juniper tree. But then heaven sent angels to minister to him. I want you to notice the timing of God. An angel didn't touch him when he was victorious at Carmel. Oftentimes, heaven seems absent and silent during our joyous and victorious moments. It's when we're discouraged that heaven comes down and we feel the brush of angels' wings and we know we're in the presence of the Lord. Oh, I just feel like I'm talking to somebody right now. It's when we're down that we sense the nearness of the God who said, I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you. Lo, when you are low, I'm with you always, even until the end of the world. The angel ministered to Elijah's need. He told Elijah to arise and eat. And when Elijah focused where the angel was pointing, he saw a fire was built. And upon it was a baked cake. A cruse of cold water was at his head. He ate, he drank, then he slept. Notice the angel of the Lord ministered first to Elijah's physical needs. He needed nourishment. He needed rest. Some discouragement comes from just those basic things. Notice the touching tenderness of our God. He was so gentle with the discouraged prophet. He didn't rebuke him and say, you should have done this and you should have done that. Discouraged people don't need that. No, they're their own worst critic. They don't need that from anybody. God didn't do it. Neither should we. The psalmist said it's God's gentleness that makes us great. We find, second, the angel touched him again. Tell him to eat and drink, for the journey is too great for thee. Elijah would eventually arise and travel 40 days and 40 nights from the strength of that angel's food. So we see that God wanted Elijah strengthened physically before he went any further. Never make great decisions in a moment of discouragement. The ancient mariners sailing the 7 seas would not chart a course at night. No, they waited until there was a clear light of day to fix a course. And so should we. Don't make decisions when everything's cloudy. Make sure everything is clear. God did not agree with Elijah's discouraged opinion of his situation, but what God did was strengthen him, and Elijah changed his mind for the better. So he was exhausted. That was the first source of discouragement, and you and I should always look to that when we're feeling discouragement. Here's the second reason. He was lonely. Elijah, we read later, thought he was all alone in his defense of God. He thought he was the only one standing against Israel's idolatry and the corruption of Ahab's court. When Elijah stood alone against 400 prophets of Baal, you might get the opinion, here's someone that doesn't need anybody else. But remember, Elijah was a man of like passions, James said, as you and me. He felt all alone. He was lonely. That's always a cause for discouragement. Others had tried to remove idolatry from Israel and failed. Now, under the juniper tree, Elijah felt like he had failed. He said, I'm not better than my fathers. They couldn't remove idolatry, neither can I. But he was not so lonely as he imagined himself to be. First of all, God knew where he was. As Job said, God knows the way that I take. You can't run from God. God found Elijah under that juniper tree. God knows where you are. He knows the way you take. He knows how to reach you. Oh, there is just something beautiful in that. Neither was Elijah alone in standing up for God, because the Lord said, no, you're not alone. There are 7,000 Israelites who've not bowed to Baal. Think about that. Think about that. Devotion family, think about it. God knew each and every person that had stood up. God knew the name and location of each person who did not turn their back on him. How powerful is that? God knows and God cares. Elijah didn't know they were there, but God did. So God ministers to Elijah's physical needs. He assures him, you're not alone. The Lord provided a cure for the contributing factors of discouragement. But finally, and here it is, a huge source of Elijah's discouragement was not just fatigue and loneliness, it was fear. From beneath the juniper tree, Elijah would go and hide in a cave. He was encouraged, he was strengthened, but he was still afraid. God saw this. So the voice of the Lord came to Elijah saying, what are you doing here? Elijah, the cave is no place for you. You don't need to be wasting away under a juniper tree or in a cave. Discouragement is no place to belong, and fear certainly isn't either. Oh, that's so powerful. That's so powerful. I wish I could just underscore this in your mind. Discouragement will lead us to caves. It will lead us to places beyond the reach of human beings. I would just caution you, morning devotion family, can I just caution you? Sometimes when you see someone who is aloof and you see someone who acts like they're not concerned, maybe they don't want to run with you, hang with you, they just think they're better than me. They think they're more important than me. I would nearly guarantee you 9 times out of 10, that person is either exhausted, lonely, discouraged, afraid. And what they need is not someone to stiff-arm them. They need someone with the wisdom of a serpent and the harmlessness of a dove to approach them and to come alongside them as the comforter would do and to walk with them in their discouragement. Yes. What are you doing in this cave? Elijah answered and said, I'm just trying, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just here. Get up out of the cave. I have something for you to do, Elijah. God sent Elijah on a mission. He said, I want you to go anoint Jehu king over Israel. He sent Elijah to call Elisha to be his successor. He sent him to anoint the next king of Syria. And suddenly, with that old courage and determination, Elijah, with a sense of purpose, exited the cave and re-entered God's purpose for his life. He knew God was in control, and he had a role to fulfill. For each of us to deal with discouragement is probably as unique as you and I are. But there are a few ways that are just simply timeless. One of the greatest ways to overcome discouragement is just do something for others. Elijah went and called Elisha. He anointed Jehu. By helping others, he got his mind off of himself. There's a time when things were bad for David. You remember he was hunted. Saul, it was just a David safari. He was after David. David just nearly lost his grip on himself, began to lose faith in God. It was then his best friend Jonathan went out at night to David in the woods of Ziph. And the Bible said that Jonathan strengthened David's hand in God. Whew. Oh, praise God. We need to strengthen our hand in the Lord. If it's transgression that's causing the discouragement, you take it to the one who cares. I believe the deepest discouragement is when we know we've let God down, we've let others down, we've let ourselves down. When a person sins, they sin against their own soul. And it's then that the enemy can bring discouragement. That's the enemy's prize device, to get discouraged, to cause someone to say, it doesn't matter what I do or say. Nobody cares about me. I've gone this far, I may as well just throw in the towel. You see, discouragement is an insidious, diabolical thing. The enemy works in times of discouragement, yes. But here's what God does. God sends his grace on ahead, saying, all you have to do is turn to me. I see where you're at under the juniper tree. I will help you. I will be there for you. Can I close with a story? Before I tell you this story, just let me a couple of reminders. I am overseas, so it limits me somewhat in communicating. I apologize for that. Thank you for your faithfulness. Second of all, YouTubers, subscribe, Facebook, follow, share with one another. And then third, starting 1 week from today on KYCC, you'll see kycc.com out in the description. You can share in the same thing and yet completely different that we're going on radio, and we're looking forward to that. Urge you to come and be a part of that. A great story in closing. All of this week we're going to be dealing with discouragement. But it was in a certain community, a stranger settled to practice law. He always walked alone, head down, a look of distress, quite often on his furrowed brow. One day he confided to an artist that he had made a sad and terrible mistake in his life. And the artist said nothing, but immediately returned to his studio. Weeks later, he invited this sad, troubled lawyer to come to his studio and view a portrait that he completed. He wanted his opinion on it. He told the lawyer, he said, "I believe this is my masterpiece." The lawyer was surprised and honored. He was no art critic, but he was honored that the artist would ask his opinion on such a thing. When the lawyer came into the studio, he was surprised to see that the portrait was of himself. But it was different. The look of distress was gone from his face. His head was no longer looking toward the ground. His shoulders were thrown back. A look of confidence possessed his countenance and bearing. The lawyer looked at the painting a few moments and said, "Sir, if you see that in me, then I can see it." He walked away saying, "If the artist thinks I can be that man, then I will be that man." Has the devil placed that oddly shaped device of discouragement some area of your life or family? Are you right now under the juniper tree? It's time to be touched by an angel and to exit this and to see the glory of God on display. You folks are amazing. Say a prayer for us as we're overseas. Looking forward to being back home later this week, and may the Lord be with you. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Morning Devotion with Ken Gurley. Join us next time for another inspiring devotion. To support this ministry, please visit firstchurch.com/give.